Chapter 1: The lie you were taught about motivation. Motivation feels powerful when it arrives. That is why it deceives you. It gives you energy, clarity, urgency. For a moment, everything feels possible. You plan your life in that state. You promise discipline. You imagine consistency. And then, quietly, motivation disappears, not because something went wrong, but because motivation was never meant to stay. This is the lie modern culture never questions. That motivation is the engine of action. That if you could just stay motivated, your life would finally move forward. The Japanese never believed this. They considered motivation unreliable, emotional, and dangerous. Something that created bursts of action followed by collapse. Something that felt good but built nothing stable. Centuries ago, Japanese warriors trained under a very different assumption. They assumed motivation would fail. Always. So they built a system that did not depend on it. In the early 1600s, Miyamoto Musashi warned his students against relying on internal states. He believed emotions were weather, useful to observe, foolish to follow. He taught that any system requiring motivation would collapse under pressure, and pressure always comes. This is why your motivation disappears when you are tired, when life becomes difficult, when results take longer than expected, when no one is watching, when progress feels invisible. Motivation thrives on novelty. The moment repetition appears, it weakens. Musashi trained for repetition. You feel motivated when you watch a video, read a quote, or imagine a better version of yourself. That motivation is real, but it is temporary by design. It exists to initiate movement, not to sustain it. Modern life confuses initiation with mastery. You start projects with excitement. You quit when boredom arrives. You assume boredom means something is wrong. The Japanese assumed boredom was the beginning of real training. This is where the system breaks for most people. You don't fail because you lack motivation. You fail because you expect motivation to carry you through repetition. Musashi believed repetition without motivation was the foundation of strength. He taught that action taken without emotional fuel was purer, more precise, and more reliable. This is uncomfortable to accept because motivation feels personal. It feels like proof that you care. Letting go of it feels like becoming robotic. The samurai rejected this fear. They believed reliance on emotion made a man fragile. Emotional highs created emotional lows. Motivation created collapse. This is why your motivation disappears after a few days of effort. The nervous system cannot sustain emotional intensity indefinitely. It seeks balance. Musashi built balance first. He taught his students to act the same way whether they felt inspired or empty, whether they felt confident or uncertain, whether progress was visible or not. This is why motivation feels powerful but useless. It is not designed for consistency. The ancient Japanese system assumed three truths modern culture ignores. First, motivation is unpredictable. Second, discipline based on force burns out. Third, identity outlasts emotion. Musashi did not ask his students how motivated they felt. He asked whether they showed up. Not energetically, not enthusiastically, but reliably. This is why the system worked. Modern people wait to feel ready. Samurai trained themselves to move without readiness. This is where most people misunderstand discipline. They imagine it as force, as pressure, as self-violence. Musashi rejected this. He believed force created resistance. Resistance created fatigue. Fatigue created abandonment. Instead, he designed actions so small, so precise, that they did not require motivation. This is the first crack in the illusion. Motivation fails because it asks too much at once. Large goals, big promises, complete life changes, all fueled by emotion. The Japanese system worked because it removed emotion from the equation, not apathy, neutrality. Musashi taught that the strongest action is the one you can repeat even on your worst day. If your system collapses when motivation disappears, it is not a system. It is a mood. This is why self-help fails. It targets feelings instead of structure. The samurai targeted structure. They believed a man should design his life assuming he will feel unmotivated most days. The system must survive that reality. If it does not, it will fail. This is not pessimism. It is precision. In the next chapter, you will learn the exact ancient Japanese mechanism that replaces motivation entirely, and why once it is installed, action becomes automatic even when you feel empty, tired, or uncertain. And this is where most people resist the system, because it removes something they secretly enjoy. The feeling of being inspired. Motivation fails because it asks you to feel something before you act. The ancient Japanese system reversed this completely. They acted first and allowed feeling to follow if it came at all. This single inversion is why their method worked when everything else collapsed. Most modern systems depend on internal permission. You wait until you feel ready, until you feel confident, until you feel inspired. Action becomes conditional, and conditions are rarely met consistently. The Japanese never trusted internal states. They trusted structure. They believed a man should design his life so action required no negotiation, no emotional debate, no internal conversation. When students asked how to stay consistent without motivation, the answer was simple and unsettling. Remove choice. This does not mean becoming rigid or mechanical. It means eliminating daily decision-making around action. The moment you decide whether to act, motivation enters the equation and the system breaks. The Japanese system worked because action was no longer optional. Modern people misunderstand this and assume it means harsh discipline. It doesn't. Harshness still depends on force, and force burns out. The system was built on inevitability. Actions were scheduled into life so deeply that they became part of identity, not preference. You did not train because you felt like it. You trained because that was who you were. This is the core difference. Motivation tries to push behavior from the outside. Identity pulls behavior from the inside. But identity is not created through affirmation. It is created through repetition under constraint. This is where most people fail. They try to motivate themselves to become disciplined, instead of structuring their environment so discipline is unavoidable. The Japanese designed their days so that avoidance was harder than action. Training happened at the same time, in the same place, with the same expectations. Whether the student felt strong or weak did not matter. Emotion was irrelevant. This is why motivation faded without consequence. The system did not depend on it. Modern people rely on flexibility. Flexibility feels freeing, but it destroys consistency. Every flexible decision becomes a negotiation. Every negotiation drains energy. Eventually, you choose comfort. The Japanese reduced flexibility intentionally. They did not allow endless options. They narrowed the path so deeply that deviation felt unnatural. This is why their system survived fatigue, boredom, and doubt. When you remove motivation from the process, action becomes neutral. It loses drama. There is no inner resistance to overcome because resistance feeds on choice. You stop asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" That question disappears. This is what modern culture fears most. It sounds like loss of freedom, but the Japanese understood something deeper. True freedom is freedom from inner conflict. Motivation creates conflict. One part of you wants action, another wants comfort. You bounce between them, exhausted. The Japanese system ended the argument entirely. They believed clarity was more important than enthusiasm. This is why their system feels cold to modern ears. It does not promise excitement. It promises stability. And stability outperforms inspiration every time. Here is the mechanism they used. They reduced action to its smallest irreversible unit. Not a full workout, not a complete project, not a perfect session. One precise, unavoidable action. So small it could not be resisted, but meaningful enough to preserve continuity. This is not habit-building advice. Habits are still optional. This was obligation. The action was bound to time, not mood. When the time arrived, action occurred. Not because of discipline, because that was the structure. This is why motivation was unnecessary. Motivation is only needed when structure is weak. The stronger the structure, the less emotion matters. Most people design systems backwards. They create large goals and hope motivation will sustain them. When it doesn't, they blame themselves. The Japanese assumed motivation would disappear and designed systems that thrived without it. This is why they progressed slowly but never stopped. Slow consistency compounds. Motivation spikes do not. This is the part modern people resist most. Slow progress feels insignificant, invisible, boring. The Japanese saw boredom as confirmation that the system was working. If action feels dramatic, it is unstable. If it feels ordinary, it is sustainable. Motivation feeds on novelty. Systems feed on repetition. This is why you can stay motivated for a week and fail for years. You are not broken. Your system is. The ancient system removed motivation by making action inevitable. Not forced, not emotional. Inevitable. This is where identity begins to shift. When you act without motivation repeatedly, something subtle happens. You stop seeing yourself as someone who needs motivation. You become someone who acts. This is the real replacement. Motivation is replaced by reliability. Reliability changes self-image, and self-image changes behavior permanently. Asterisk. Chapter 3. Why stability feels like death. The moment motivation disappears, most people panic. They say something feels wrong. Life feels flat, empty, colorless. The excitement is gone. The fire that once pushed them forward has vanished, and in its place is a quiet, uncomfortable stillness. This is the exact moment when most people abandon the system, not because it failed, but because it worked. Stability feels threatening to a mind addicted to emotional movement. Modern life trains you to confuse intensity with progress. If something doesn't feel powerful, urgent, or dramatic, you assume it isn't working. The ancient Japanese believed the opposite. They believed that emotional calm was the prerequisite for mastery, not a reward for it. When students trained under Miyamoto Musashi, they often complained that training had become dull, repetitive, uninspiring. They feared they were losing passion. Musashi considered this the most dangerous misunderstanding of all. He taught that excitement is not fuel, it is noise, and noise hides weakness. Motivation creates emotional peaks, but peaks require valleys. The higher the excitement, the deeper the collapse that follows. This is why motivated bursts are always followed by long periods of avoidance. The Japanese system deliberately flattened emotion, not to remove feeling, but to remove dependency on it. This flattening feels like loss at first. You no longer feel driven. You no longer feel special. You no longer feel like something big is happening. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They chase stimulation to restore the feeling of movement. They create drama. They switch goals. They look for new inspiration. They break consistency to feel alive again. Musashi warned that this impulse destroys more progress than laziness ever could. He believed boredom was not an obstacle. It was a signal. Boredom means the nervous system is no longer being entertained. It is being trained. This is the stage where the modern mind rebels. Without motivation, action feels mechanical, ordinary, unsatisfying. The ego feels ignored. You no longer feel heroic for showing up. That is exactly why the system works. The ego feeds on motivation. When motivation disappears, the ego feels threatened. It wants recognition, excitement, validation. Stability offers none of that. The Japanese system starved the ego intentionally. Musashi believed ego-driven action was unreliable. It chased praise, avoided difficulty, and collapsed under invisibility. He trained men to act without audience, without reward, without emotional payoff. This is why modern people struggle with consistency. They secretly need emotional confirmation that they are progressing. The ancient system removed confirmation entirely. You acted because it was time to act, not because it felt meaningful in the moment. This is deeply uncomfortable for people raised on stimulation. When motivation disappears, you feel exposed. You begin questioning everything. Why am I doing this? What's the point? Is this even working? Musashi taught that these questions are not philosophical. They are withdrawal symptoms. The mind is used to emotional rewards. When they are gone, it invents doubt to justify escape. This is why people return to chaos. Chaos feels alive. Stability feels like death. But here is the truth most people never hear. Stability feels empty because your identity was built on emotional movement. When motivation leaves, you don't just lose energy, you lose a sense of self. The Japanese expected this. They believe the false self is built on excitement, ambition, and external validation. When these disappear, the false self collapses. What remains is raw, unimpressive, quiet, uncertain. This is the beginning of something real. Musashi believed true strength begins only after the craving for stimulation ends. Until then, action is reactive. This is why motivation-based systems create fragile people. They function only when conditions are perfect, when energy is high, when progress is visible, when praise is available. The ancient system built men who could act under emptiness. This is the part modern culture avoids. We are taught to chase passion. The Japanese trained endurance. Endurance is not suffering. It is tolerance for neutrality, the ability to act when nothing feels good. This is why the system feels harsh to modern ears, but it produced stability that motivation never could. Once students accepted this phase, something shifted. Action stopped feeling heavy. It became normal. They stopped waiting for desire. They stopped fearing boredom. They stopped seeking emotional reward. And quietly, without noticing, mastery began. Progress became invisible but unstoppable. This is why people underestimate systems that feel boring. They assume nothing is happening. The Japanese knew something was happening beneath the surface. The nervous system was our ecalibrating. Action without emotion trains the body to trust consistency over feeling. Over time, this creates confidence. Not excitement. Confidence. This confidence does not spike. It does not crash. It remains. Musashi believed this state was invincibility, not because nothing could hurt you, but because nothing could knock you off your path. This is why motivation always fails. It creates dependence on feeling. The ancient system removed feeling from the equation. But here's the danger. If stability is not anchored to something meaningful, it turns into stagnation. The Japanese understood this too. They did not stop at consistency. They anchored consistency to duty. Without duty, stability becomes emptiness. This is why many people reach discipline and still feel lost. They removed chaos but never replaced it with meaning. In the next chapter, you will learn how the ancient Japanese anchored action to obligation, why responsibility is stronger than motivation, and how duty turns stability into direction. This is where the system becomes unbreakable. Chapter 4. Why duty is stronger than motivation. Motivation disappears the moment life becomes inconvenient. Duty does not. This is the difference. The ancient Japanese understood better than any modern system. They did not ask, "How do I stay motivated?" They asked a far more dangerous question. What am I responsible for? Even when I don't feel like it? Motivation is internal. It rises and falls with emotion, energy, and mood. Duty is external. It exists whether you feel strong or weak, inspired or empty. And because it is external, it does not negotiate with your feelings. This is why duty outlives motivation. When students trained under Miyamoto Musashi, they were not asked what they wanted. They were assigned obligations, responsibilities that did not disappear when enthusiasm faded, tasks that would fail if neglected. Musashi believed this was essential. He taught that a man who relies on internal desire will abandon his path the moment desire changes. A man bound by responsibility will act even when desire is absent. Modern people resist this idea instinctively. Duty feels heavy, limiting, restrictive. Motivation feels free and empowering. But Musashi saw the truth clearly. Motivation creates chaos. Duty creates direction. When your actions depend on how you feel, your life becomes unpredictable. Progress becomes fragile. Consistency becomes impossible. Duty removes the question. You do not wake up asking whether you should act. You wake up knowing you must. This does not crush freedom. It creates stability. The Japanese understood that freedom without structure leads to distraction. Structure without meaning leads to emptiness. Duty balanced both. This is why discipline anchored to responsibility lasts. Think carefully about your own life. Where motivation fails you most is when nothing truly depends on you. When there is no consequence for disappearing, distraction becomes irresistible. Musashi trained his students so disappearance was impossible. They were responsible for younger students, for maintaining equipment, for teaching principles, for preserving tradition. Their absence had impact. Responsibility reorganizes attention instantly. When someone depends on your presence, distraction feels dangerous. Not morally wrong, practically costly. This is why people suddenly become disciplined when responsibility appears. Parenthood, leadership, crisis, obligation sharpens focus faster than any motivational speech. Musashi engineered this. Deliberately, he assigned responsibility before mastery. Students talked before they felt ready. They carried weight before confidence arrived. Modern culture does the opposite. It waits until you feel prepared before giving responsibility. This delays growth indefinitely. Musashi believed readiness is created by responsibility, not the other way around. This is why duty is stronger than motivation. Motivation asks, "What do I feel like doing today?" Duty asks, "What must be done regardless?" The second question ends in a conflict. When duty is clear, the mind stops negotiating. Action becomes simpler. Not easier, but simpler. This simplicity is what most people mistake for harshness. But Musashi believed clarity was mercy. Indecision exhausts the mind. Endless choice drains energy. Motivation-based living requires constant emotional assessment. Duty-based living removes that burden. This is why modern people feel mentally tired even before acting. They are negotiating with themselves all day. The ancient system eliminated this. Once duty was defined, action followed automatically. This is the system that replaced motivation. Not force, not pressure, responsibility. But here is where most people misunderstand. Duty. They imagine it as obligation imposed by others, rules, authority, control. Musashi taught a deeper version. True duty is chosen, not emotionally chosen, but consciously accepted. Once accepted, it is no longer debated. This is why duty creates identity. When you bind yourself to responsibility, you stop acting as a consumer of experiences and become a custodian of outcomes. Your attention shifts outward. Distraction loses its appeal because something real is at stake. This is why motivation-based systems collapse in isolation. They are self-referential. You are the only one affected by your success or failure. Duty connects you to something beyond yourself. This is the missing piece. You cannot defeat distraction while remaining the center of your own universe. The phone addiction, the procrastination, the endless scrolling, all of it feeds on self-absorption, on boredom with oneself. Duty breaks that loop. It gives attention somewhere to go. Musashi believed a man without duty would always seek stimulation. A man with duty would seek clarity. This is why he said discipline is not about control, but about service. Service to a craft, service to a lineage, service to a responsibility larger than comfort. When action serves something external, motivation becomes irrelevant. You show up because it matters, not because you feel like it. This is the ancient Japanese system in its strongest form. But there is one final transformation left. Duty creates consistency. Consistency creates identity. Identity eventually replaces effort. At that point, action becomes natural. You do not feel disciplined. You feel aligned. This is where motivation is no longer needed at all. In the final chapter, you will see how duty transforms into identity, how identity ends in a resistance permanently, and why the strongest people no longer feel like they are trying. This is where the system completes itself. Chapter 5, when identity replaces effort. Day motivation stops controlling you is not the day you become disciplined. It is the day you stop needing to try. This is the final stage of the ancient Japanese system, and the one most people never reach. They stay trapped in effort, forever pushing themselves forward, forever fighting resistance, forever needing something to feel right before acting. The Japanese believed this was unnecessary suffering. They understood that effort is temporary, but identity is permanent. When action still feels like something you must force, the system is incomplete. When action feels natural, even boring, even obvious, the system has taken root. This is where motivation disappears for good. In his late years, Miyamoto Musashi stopped talking about discipline entirely. He spoke only about being. He believed the highest form of mastery was when action no longer felt like action. A swordsman did not try to train. A calligrapher did not try to write. A warrior did not try to show up. They simply did. This is the transformation modern systems never complete. They focus on behavior change but ignore identity change. They teach you what to do, not who to become. As long as you see yourself as someone who needs motivation, you will always need motivation. As long as you see yourself as someone who struggles with consistency, you will continue to struggle. Musashi believed identity is shaped through repetition under duty, not affirmation. You do not become disciplined by telling yourself you are disciplined. You become disciplined by acting in alignment with duty so many times that the idea of not acting feels strange. This is how effort dissolves. At first, action feels heavy. You resist. You negotiate. You struggle. Over time, resistance weakens, not because you forced it away, but because the identity that produced it is no longer dominant. You stop asking, should I do this? You stop asking, do I feel like it? You stop asking, is this worth it? Those questions belong to an earlier version of you. Musashi believed true freedom begins when internal debate ends. This is why motivation-based living is exhausting. You are constantly arguing with yourself. One part wants comfort, another wants growth. The battle never ends. The ancient system ends the battle. When identity stabilizes, action aligns automatically. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes clear. You still face difficulty, fatigue, doubt, but these no longer stop movement. They become background noise. This is why disciplined people often appear calm. They are not fighting themselves anymore. The modern world misunderstands this calm and calls it apathy. It is not. It is resolution. Resolution means the question has already been answered. Musashi believed that once a man resolves who he is, circumstances lose their power over him. He no longer reacts. He responds. This is the deepest reason motivation fails. Motivation requires constant redecision. Identity removes the need for decision. This is why the ancient Japanese system worked across generations. It did not rely on feelings, inspiration, or temporary energy. It relied on character. Character outlasts emotion. When identity takes over, distraction loses its grip, not because it is forbidden, but because it does not fit. Scrolling feels foreign. Procrastination feels pointless. Avoidance feels uncomfortable. Not because you are disciplined, because you are aligned. This is why people who reach this stage rarely talk about motivation. They don't need it. Their life has direction. Direction is the true antidote to distraction. Most people scroll not because they lack discipline, but because they lack direction. Motivation temporarily fills the gap. Identity closes it permanently. Musashi warned that many people stop one step before this transformation. They build habits, routines, and discipline, but never allow identity to change. They remain performers, not practitioners. A performer needs applause. A practitioner needs only alignment. The Japanese trained practitioners. This is why the system feels slow, why it feels unglamorous, why it feels invisible. But it works. And once it works, it does not stop. This is the final truth. Motivation fails because it was never meant to carry you. It was meant to introduce you to the path, not walk it for you. The ancient Japanese system worked because it replaced motivation with structure, structure with duty, duty with identity, and identity with alignment. When alignment appears, effort disappears. You stop pushing. You stop forcing. You stop trying to become someone else. You simply continue. This is why Musashi believed mastery was quiet. No excitement, no drama, no struggle. Just presence, repeated daily. The question is no longer how to stay motivated. The question is whether you are willing to let go of the identity that needs motivation at all. Because the moment you do, the system begins working on its own.